The elders is the second generation. Again, those who led Israel after Joshua. And then the third generation that came up after the elders. Now, these three generations are symbolized by these three chairs. The first chair is the generation of Joshua. These are the people who follow God. These are the people who put God first. The third chair represents those people, the next generation. These are people who have turned their backs on God or have never worshiped God. They do not know God. The second generation represents the elders, and it represents those people who are just kind of stuck in the middle. They believe in God, but they haven't made God the center of their lives. God isn't first in their lives. And this morning I want you to think about which chair you would place yourself in. Which best describes you? Which place would you put your children in? How about your parents? Which chair would they have been in? Are they in? Now, the progress generally is downward. From generation to generation, they either stay in the chair of their parents or they slide down. Now, it's possible to go up, but generally, most times, the slide is down. The question is why? Why does that happen? Now, our first chair is Joshua. Now, as I said, Joshua gave this speech to the people, and his speech can be found at the end of the book of Joshua, Joshua 24. It's the last chapter, if you just turn back a page. Joshua 24, and I want to read the conclusion to this speech. Again, Joshua has called the people together. He's getting ready to retire, and so he's going to challenge them. This is his last address to the people, and here is the conclusion to this message. Joshua 24, beginning with verse 14. Joshua says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river in Egypt and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your forefathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Now, the word that best describes Joshua, the word that best describes this chair is commitment. Joshua was committed to God. Joshua was committed to obeying God. And when you think about some of the things God asked Joshua to do, they just didn't even make sense. What do you mean we're going to defeat the city of Jericho and all we're going to do is march around it quietly? How is that going to do anything? But he obeyed. Because of his commitment to God, God was able to do some miraculous things through Joshua. Joshua saw some miracles he never would have seen. Because he was sold out to God, he was committed to God. The elders represent the second chair, and their story can be found in the first chapter of Judges. This is what happened. Now, when the Israelites entered the Promised Land, there wasn't just a bunch of empty land there that you could just go take possession of. There were people living there. God had said that these people had sinned against him, that he had given them time to repent, and they hadn't. And so he was judging them, and this is the way he was judging them. God told the Israelites that they were to go in and they were to completely drive out all of the inhabitants there. And the reason was twofold. One, because of their sin, this was their judgment. And the second was, he knew that if they didn't, that the people would become a snare, a temptation to the people, that would lead them astray. Joshua chapter 1, beginning with verse 27, verses 27 through 30. But Manasseh did not drive out the people of Beth-shan or Taanach or Dor or Ibleam or Megiddo and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land. When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. Nor did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer, but the Canaanites continued to live there among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites living in Kitron or Naphtali, who remained among them, but they did subject them to forced labor. And you see what continues. You see the process that they didn't obey. They didn't completely follow God's commands. They didn't drive out the people before them. And so the best description of the elders was compromise. Compromise. Joshua was committed. The elders compromised. For Joshua, it was all about God. God was first. It was all about God. For the elders, it was God and me. If a choice had to be made between God and me, it was a difficult choice to make. They didn't know, and sometimes they chose themselves. The third chair is the next generation. It's the generation that grew up after all the elders had died. The elders had seen some of those miracles. They had heard about the miracles that happened out in the desert. They were there for Jericho, but this next generation, they didn't know anything about those miracles. In fact, Joshua said, or the book of Judges says that they hadn't even heard about those miracles. They were never told about those miracles, and they did not even know God. Joshua experienced them. The elders heard about them. The third generation, this next generation, didn't even know about it. And the best word that describes this generation is complacency. They just didn't care. They saw the compromise of their parents. And they said, if that's the way they're going to be, if God doesn't make a big difference in their lives, if it doesn't really matter to them, then, I'm going to be honest. God doesn't matter at all. I don't care. And they just never worshiped God. Instead, they worshiped the idols of those people that their parents had failed to drive out. They worshiped the idols of the Canaanites, the Amorites. Even though their parents had said, yes, we will follow after God, their children were never told, and they didn't worship God. Now the problem is it's difficult to tell the difference between chair 1 and chair 2. On the outside, they look a lot alike. They both believe in God. They both pray. They'll both carry their Bibles to church, but on the inside there's a difference. And that difference is commitment. The difference is commitment. Chair 1 grows off a relationship with God. For chair 2, religion is just something you do. Something you do on Sunday morning. But it's certainly not your reason for living. Now, there are other examples of these three generations in the Bible. Now, take Abraham, for example. Which chair would you put Abraham in? It's kind of quiet in here. Which chair would you put Abraham in? 1. Abraham was sold out. He was committed. God said, I want you to leave your home place, and I want you to go 1,000 miles. I want you to travel to a place that you've never been, never seen. And what did Abraham do? Well, he just packed his bags and went. And when he got there, the first thing he did was build an altar to God. And then later he dug a well, set up residence.